Welcome to Papa Len's podcast, episode 72. Today, we are going to be talking about Western civilization. Is it on the verge of collapse? That's the question that we have for you today. And my name is Barn.
And I'm Arky Jones. Remember, we're just a couple of dads chewing the fat, nothing more, nothing less. Comment, like, subscribe, be in touch with us, give us some ideas. Thank you. We'll see you on the other side. So, mate, the collapse of Western civilization, it sounds so dramatic, but it does get, I've been thinking it for a while. Now, it's a bit of a gray area because there's many kind of populations that have come before us. So what I mean by that, there's been like the British Empire, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Germans had a crack, the Spanish had a crack, the French had a crack, and all these empires eventually come to an end. And we're currently after the collapse of Russia, the collapse of the Soviet Union, should I say, not Russia. We start to live in an age of, instead of two empires, which was the Soviet Union and the American or the West.
Yeah,
we've now, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, we've lived in kind of American-dominated world. And one thing that American, they've given the world is kind of like rock and roll, fast food, culture. It's been a constant culture war, but that culture made us very, very prosperous. It enabled us to buy homes. It enabled us to eat well. It enabled us, with our salary, to look after our families. And if you worked hard, you could get by. And something since the, 2020, maybe a little bit before that, but particularly 2020, something in the social contract across the West has been broken. And I don't know about you, but when I say collapse of the West, what I can tell you is there has definitely been a collapse in my ability, even though I'm working. I used to work part-time. I've gone back up to full-time. There is a collapse in my ability to pay the bills and have leftover money. Whereas, in 2018, I remember going to part-time because there was an abundance.
Okay. I don't know. Going back to the topic for today, I mean, we're just speculating, talking about collapse. We know that. I mean, there are civilizations that have come and gone. But for us to say the Western civilization is on the verge of collapse, it's probably something that is debatable. Why is that so? It's because you can't, really completely get rid of a civilization. I don't think you can. They are instances of there will be instances of cultural, interference, into the civilization. But for us to say that it's going to be entirely wiped out, I think it's. I don't think it's completely possible.
No, but I don't know if you see a collapse. It's not necessarily something like a volcanic eruption. It can be a slow. So think about how termites infest a home. It doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't happen in a year. But 10, 15 years later, if you don't get on top of it, the house collapses. And that's termites against one house. We have a system where there is a structural decline in the standing of living across the Western world, while at the same time, per capita GDP is heavily, heavily declining. At the same time, we have massive rises in population rates, therefore providing a gross domestic product that is going up by like 1% a year, but the individual wealth amongst the citizens is being distributed much more widely. We're also all competing for the same chicken, the same rice, the same groceries. You know, at the basic level, we're paying the same fuel. We've got the electric, the gas, the water. And so by collapse, is it fair to say that somewhere in the 80s and 90s that the Western world, there was a very, very clear delineation between living in, let's say, in London, than there is living in, let's say, I don't know, Beijing. Whereas now, I would argue that the difference between London and Beijing has narrowed significantly from the olden days. Like, but so either, like, for example, and Beijing's a good example because China's quite a wealthy country, but with a lot of poor people in it. Either two things have happened. London hasn't continued to grow in terms of an economic powerhouse, in terms of its livability, in terms of its crime, in terms, you know, or Beijing has just grown so much. But both can't be true. Both things can't be true. Like, London can't be, you know, however many times better it was than Beijing from the 80s than it is now, without either London not keeping pace or Beijing growing at such a fast rate that it becomes, you know, a city that is much more livable. And so, for example, if you ask me, would you rather live in London, or let's say, I'm just going to pick another city, let's say Singapore, unless I was a multimillionaire, I would pick Singapore any day of the week. Whereas Western, and look at San Francisco. Yeah. You know, the question I have to you is, if you were poor, would you want to live in San Francisco? And by poor, I mean an average blue collar worker.
Yeah, no, probably not. The something is beginning to show. You know, there is now this stuck, you know, difference that makes us to even, you know, start talking about this, about the West. Look at China, like you said earlier. You know, you make a comparison China and England. You know, obviously in terms of infrastructure, England is a little bit. China has gone past England. Would you agree over there?
It's certainly a major infrastructure projects. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. England or even the United States. I mean, that's the truth. You know, the decline of the Western civilization is inevitable. It's not that people of Western persuasion are letting it be that way.
No,
it's because of, you know, the gradual change that nobody can stop. And it's not easy though to completely eradicate a civilization, because there is usually resistance, you know, from that group of people. The resistance will always be there.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one though, because I would say in some Western countries at the minute, and I can say this is likely, not definitely, but likely a truth, when you see some of this disparity in prison sentences for, say, someone doing a heinous crime in real life, and then somebody making a post that may be offensive on one of the social media platforms, and the person making the offensive post gets longer jail time than the person that actually hurt a human being in real life. And so I think that a collapse can be a mental collapse as well. So you demoralize a civilization, you demoralize a people, and therefore they think, well, what's the point? You know, what am I? So you then become more insular. You then become more nuclear. You focus on what you can control, which is yourself, your family, and your friends, instead of thinking of that broader community. So homogenous societies where they're working towards a similar goal, overall, there may be more willingness to, and by homogenous, I mean the rule of law is clear, it's enforced. And a good example of Dubai, I think Dubai has got more migrants than it has, local population.
Yeah.
But it's an incredibly successful country in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of there's quite little crime there. It always appears well maintained. The weather's a bit hot for my liking, but we can't control that. And the point I'm trying to make is that countries that had every natural advantage, such as the UK, because they went around the world, pillaging for the elites, not, just to be clear, not for the working people, but for the elites.
Yeah.
And then you've got America, who, by the grace of God, has got massive natural resources, but also it's got a spirit of adventure. And that is instilled in their population, or at least it was, where the Americans have a will and a belief, because it's not overly regulated compared to a lot of the European countries or Australasia, oceanic countries. It's not as overregulated. They have an entrepreneurial spirit. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp, all these like huge companies, Apple, Microsoft, they're all from America. Elon Musk chose to go to America for his business as well. And so what I'm trying to say is that America is clearly, if it's done well, has the ability to back off from collapse. But then when I see pictures of San Francisco, when I see the fires in California and the poor, clearly there was some really bad decisions made at some point by the government, and no one admits it. I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what the collapse is nobody ever says what they think anymore. And we're kind of in this world, we're in this web of lies where it's so polarized that this one politician who's on this side sticks to this narrative, this other politician and sticks to this narrative. And it's kind of like no one can face the truth. And so I would argue we are collapsing because there's a collapse in confidence amongst our own people.
Yeah, man, the other thing too that I can see, sort of infiltrating into that is, cultural globalization. Eh, it, I believe that's a big thing, when you look at it, uh, because everybody else, say in the Western world, uh, always wants to be culturally correct in the eyes of the world. That's the thing. What does that do? It compromises who they are. So they would have to accommodate what they probably wouldn't under normal circumstances. I think this is inevitably brought by the technological advancement that the world is currently experiencing. It's become easier for people to mingle in a way. With that, it brings a lot of a need for different cultures to sort of compromise. But then I think this is happening too quickly, to an extent that it's compromising some cultures. It is compromising some belief systems. I think this is exactly the way I see things happening.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about the cultural decline, because a lot of Western countries across the European Union, particularly, even Canada, they've been almost been made to be ashamed to show national pride. Like flying the English flag, for example, is seen as some kind of like, ugly gesture. And I think the other thing that has caused a bit of devolution in quality of life is the way they throw the word racism around in the modern world. They've diluted the word so much that it's difficult to know what it means anymore. I mean, what is your opinion on like if I asked you now,
Mm.
you know, what is racism? I don't need you to divine it. What I'm saying is you'd have an idea of what that would look like, yeah. But it almost feels in the Western world that anytime anyone has an opinion that is outside the mainstream, then they're called bigots or racists. And I'll give you one example.
Mm.
Let's say that X country
Mm.
brings in 1.5 1.5 million immigrants, yeah, and then those immigrants commit heinous crimes against the population. Not all of them, like at 0.1%, just to be,
Yeah.
because every society is going to have bad people.
Yeah.
But then they don't deport those people that can, get those crimes because they say they've got a right to life and a right to, human rights and all this stuff. And while in some ways it's admirable, in other ways it leaves the native populations, the people that were there already, confused because everyone's going to commit crime. But
Mm.
if you've come in as as someone who wants to be part of that society, surely, like, put it this way, what I want from people that come here, irrespective whether they're from Australia or from overseas, is that they follow the rules, they work hard, they obey the laws,
Mm.
they have a voice where needed to facilitate change for things that could be done better. They're willing to share their culture, the best aspects of their culture, and they're willing to share the best aspects of our culture. And then together we will grow and we will learn. And in that case, diversity is strength. But I don't agree with bringing, with people coming in such numbers that it replaces the entire local populations.
Yeah. No, look, geography is geography. That's why there's China, there's England, there's Africa, there's
Mm.
preferably people should be comfortable in their own sort of natural habitat, whatever. This is how these things were designed, and I think it's not only the Western world where the people find a need to control the population, even in some places, or whether it is also happening in Africa. Maybe they don't talk so much about it, but I think that at some point, because everybody gets afraid when somebody is assertive about some things that are bothering them. Don't get me wrong, it's not that we are anti-migration. It's not the case, because we are migrants ourselves. I
Of
think
course.
it's good if it's done in an orderly fashion. In a way, it's good. But um the way I'm looking at it, looking at the bigger picture, with the West, I mean, in general, the Western civilization, and something like that. What happened is, the history, it was a history of, dominance.
Mm.
It was a history of subduing, the other population, and enslavement, and things like that.
Yeah.
And what that has done is, it's sort of um given these other people, an everlasting sense of victimhood. This is exactly what has happened. And to say that, did the West do things correctly? Probably not. Like any other civilization, you'd find that there's always a hierarchy, with the elitists, running the show,
Mhm.
as is today.
Yep.
It does happen.
There's one thing also just to further this conversation on civilization collapse,
Yeah.
and one solid proof that civilization is actually in collapse is, let's go to a little bit more of a micro section in one civilization.
Yeah.
So, Cal, can you just Google the birth rate in South Korea? South Korean birth rate, please. And
Mm.
just let us know when you've got it. So, I believe it's 0.71
Mm.
in South Korea. Is that right? 0.72
0.72. That's
in South Korea.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that that is terrifying is that is below replacement.
Yeah.
So there's two things that can happen there. Is one, there's no one to look after the elderly and no taxpayers to pay the pensions.
Mm.
And no one to maintain the streets, the elevators, the, collect the bins, because the population has been within 2 generations is decimated. Or mass immigration from countries with positive birth rates to replace the lacking births in that country. And by replace, I mean I don't mean a direct replacement. I mean something has to fill the gap, because someone has to do the work.
Yeah, and I'm talking of the countries like, is it, say, South Korea? Um, uh, Historically, I don't think it's had a lot of migration.
No,
I
no.
don't think so. Um, I don't know. They are in the East Sunday.
So it's kind of on the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes down at like near China, basically. So North Korea borders China. That's how they were able to help in the Korean War in the 50s.
Yeah.
And South Korea is kind of in the bottom of that. But yeah, it's a peninsula, but it's attached to China. So it's a fairly isolated place. But at the same time, something's obviously gone wrong. The same in Japan. And I wonder if one of the factors for the end of a civilization, not the human race, civilization, is that people get too comfortable. Because Korea and Japan are both incredibly wealthy countries with a great per capita GDP, really safe streets in the main, and no real adversity that they've had to face in the last, say, 30 years.
Yeah.
And the young ones are just like, I just want to have a good time. And then they put off having a baby. And then before they know it, they're 35 and they think, I might have a baby now. And then nature doesn't always work that way, and then before you know it, you don't have kids. But at 0.72, you're in a pickle in 2 generations, because it's not that you are going to that generation like matters in sense of, what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is that if they're happy with that, that's okay. But the old people in that country are going to suffer because there's no one to look after them. There's no one to pay the pay. And so therefore, if your population debases so much, it's so weak, you don't have young men and women to stand on the front line and fight for you. Someone else with a bigger population is going to come in and take it off you.
Yeah,
once you get to the point of so weak.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what's happening. And I wonder on the other side of the coin, whether is it because of the fact that what's happening with AI kicking in and the production of bots that they can replace people.
Yep.
I don't know whether this is where it's going, but as a human race, it is worrying that things are happening that way. We would expect the birth rate to be normal. And in your own honest opinion, what do you think is a contributing factor to the declining birth rate? Is it the competitiveness to make it in life, or I'm just trying to think, because South Korea, this is a country obviously that's a bit well off.
Mm-hmm. Incredibly well
Yeah,
developed.
it has it produce a generation of selfish individuals who do not want to procreate, or they want.
I mean,
Yeah.
rather than say selfish, I wonder if we have created an egocentric kind. In rich countries, we end up, because we think about it, right? When me and you were kids,
Yeah.
if you lost a race, you were called a loser.
Yeah.
If you didn't get good on the math test, you didn't get good. You know what I mean? They didn't sugarcoat it. There was no participation medals. There was no awards. There was no, let's talk about our feelings. Yeah. It was suck it up and just do your job. Do you know what I mean? Do better next time, work harder. If you want to win, you got to pay the price. Somewhere along the way, we've made it where we've been telling people that you don't have to try hard to win. You don't have to. It's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. And when I was a young fella, I mean, by young, I mean by the time I was in my, teens, I knew that my life trajectory was, find a partner, have kids, and, work hard and contribute to society and try and, make my immediate community slightly better than it is. And it never entered my head that I would not be having children. Do you know what I mean? It was not a thought. It was like, it was normal. And my question to you is, when did we normalize people not having kids?
Yeah, but the change has been big. It's hard to even think about it. I mean, we have allowed certain practices in society that even us for now talking about it. I mean, people have different views on those particular things. Like people have decided, okay, I mean, I'm not gonna have a children. Fair enough, that's their decision. And they just die without kids. I mean, for us, that's it. And then the other ones would say, oh, okay, I'm just gonna be with Paul. If it's John, he decides to be with Paul. And if it's Sarah, he probably prefers another female. I don't know. This has grown over the years. It's now accepted. It's now popular. All over the world. We know it, all right. And in a way, it seems to have been encouraged. It seems to have been encouraged, over the years. Look, I wouldn't want to be here and try and say that those things didn't happen in my part of the world. Even growing up, we knew, there were people that were different. I mean, deep, like from Africa, it's not particularly a Western thing that you get people who prefer not to be with the same gender. It used to happen, but nobody really highlighted that. Even in Africa, nobody highlighted that. And even today, we do have names for such people. And even now or today, these days, of course, because the world has been somehow liberated, people now, are very public with that. And I'm not condemning that at all, but I'm just saying that could be, a contributing factor.
I mean, everything, Barn, is the we have to have a proper conversation about the collapse of the Western civilization.
Yeah.
I think we have to couple it with how comfortable things became.
Yeah.
And we have to couple it with the change in the education system, the change in societal expectation, possibly the rise of feminism. I think that to have a proper conversation, nothing should be off the table.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, whether for whatever reason, the Western nations and rich nations like South Korea is a particularly declining birth rate, particularly worrying. This is something that we need to acknowledge, because I would say, just by the very fact that the birth rates are declining, the population is aging, that maybe not in our lifetime, but certainly within, I would say, 50 years, what we see now is not going to exist anymore. And I don't know what will replace it, but I certainly think that the countries that are going to thrive now are ones that recenter on fundamental human values, which is open, honest discussion with nothing off the table. I think everybody deserves a voice.
Yeah.
I think the more we keep quiet, I think a lot of young men these days, the reason a lot of them are choosing not to have kids is they're scared to talk to women. Because remember when we were kids, you could just go and have a chat with one and she'd reject you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm talking like a young teenager and stuff. She'd reject you and you'd move on to the next one. Then eventually you'd find someone that's like, okay, let's go for a date. Whereas these days, they're scared shitless they're going to be accused of sexual harassment. I think that, I think also the idea that we are this kind of, you know, we're all special. We're fucking not. Do you know what I mean?
Did you ever write a letter to a girl?
But I would have done.
Yeah, you'd have done. Yeah. Now the problem is, if you do, then you'd be creepy.
You'd be creepy.
Yeah.
Total creep. And the idea, like the way romance has changed, the way, I mean, sometimes though, like, I don't know. I think overall, what I'll say for my final wrap up on this is that Western civilization, it is going through a transformation. And what that will look like, I think, very much depends on the next 4 years of the Trump administration. And so I think if Trump can empower corporations, companies to pay their workers better by cutting taxes, cut taxes on the people in the country to allow them to spend more of their money on themselves, build more houses, deregulate the kind of environmental so people can build more affordable homes. I think if they can temporarily increase use of fossil fuels to drive down price of energy while they create AI that is capable of solving problems that we can't yet solve, use that additional power generation to then solve the problem of clean energy, create clean energy that can give us almost unlimited clean power, which is possible. We just need to be driven, and deregulate space travel, allow people like Elon Musk to go to Mars, allow them to take risks, allow astronauts to choose to strap themselves onto a rocket and fly to Mars, knowing they may never come back. Allow people to take risks, but also the way we can do it is we can reinvigorate family. We can explain, like, from a child level, that children are the future, and without them there is nothing, and instill in our populations that if you don't have children, then you are, you know, then the whole side will struggle. And last point, sorry, I'm going to make another point, and then I'll let you finish off. The other thing is, I think when 2 adults had to go to work to support a family, I think that's when families got smaller. And that was the beginning of the collapse of the Western civilization. 2 families needing to work just to live.
Yeah, but simpler to wrap this up from my end. I mean, the way I look at it, I think the most important thing is I've seen a situation where populations are getting muted. I think that's not good for society and societal development. People are shit scared, you know, to say anything or to protest, because what's happening is some people, you can literally end up in jail by simply expressing your opinion. I think when people are allowed to talk, when people are allowed to contribute, no matter whatever we think about whatever they are saying, we should at least be in a position to listen to what they have to say,
Mm.
because the reason why they had to speak, it's because it's something that's not sitting well with them. I know the world has changed. We have, from the last few decades, become very reasonable. And I think moving forward, we should try and enhance freedom of speech, and stop policing every stupid little thing, and that's not getting us anyway.
Yeah, no, George Orwell, 1984 wasn't supposed to be an instruction manual. All right, mate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, man.
Thanks, Carl.